Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are diving into the essential concept of procurement. This isn't just about buying office supplies, it's strategic multi-step process that can make or break your project budget or schedule. So let's dive right into it. What is procurement? Simply put, procurement is the process of acquiring goods, works, or services services from an external source. That goes into formalizing that acquisition, soliciting bids from potential sellers, selecting the absolute best supply for your needs, and finally formalizing the purchase with a solid contract. We will go through how to build a solid contract, what all things you need to consider while building or creating the contract. But the real question is, when do you start this process? The critical filter, when is it done? Procurement doesn't just start randomly. It kicks off right after you hit a major checkpoint, the make or buy analysis. That goes in, meaning you know exactly what needs to be created, built, or delivered. You stop and ask the fundamental question, should we make this in-house or should we buy it from a vendor? This analysis looks at two key financial dimensions. First one is upfront cost. Is it cheaper to buy the raw materials, hire the staff, and use the equipment to make it ourselves, or ongoing cost? That is, are we better off with an external supplier who handles the overhead, even if it means going subscription or service fees? Reasons to build in house is when you want to control the work or you want to control the intellectual properties, that is IPs, to use it in-house skills, whether to use in-house skills or if the staff is available. Now let's look at the reasons to buy or procure it from an external source. There are a few reasons. When it is less costlier than building it in-house, or when your focus is on the core project work and not the part which you are procuring. For example, there's a huge event you are planning for example, an annual conference for one of your local chapters. You are busy with planning the whole event. For example, if you are looking for speakers or planning a lunch event or something, and something you need to procure for the project or the event um, could be as simple as procuring the chairs for the attendees, or maybe a fun section where you want to have the photo booth. So there are a few vendors outside which provide the service, and you can just call them or email them, and you can just get the vendors from the outside, procure. You make the decision to buy or procure the resources from outside, and you don't get all the resources. For example, if it is a photo booth or buying the chairs, where are you going to store the chairs after the event? So you make the decision that we can buy the services for that period of time. So that is one of the reasons that procurement or the service or the product is temporary, and the focus is on the core project work and not that particular section. All right, I hope that is clear. Another one is when the staff is unavailable, or they'll there or there's a learning curve for the new skills which you don't have time for in the project. The outcome, once you have completed this analysis and the scale tip toward buy, that is the green light for the procurement process to officially begin. It transitions from a strategic decision to a focused execution plan to secure the best external partner. Now, the supply spectrum, evaluating the market condition. Now that we know we are going to buy, our next step is to understand who's out there. The structure of the market dictates how much leverage we have in negotiations. We look at the three key scenarios. As you can see it here, One is sole source. Another one is single source and oligopoly. So let's look into each one of them. Sole source means you have no choice. As you can see in the picture, there's just one vendor. You are forced to buy from one vendor because, simply put, no alternatives exist. There's only one supplier available in the entire market. This is where competition is zero. Remember, sole source is equal to no competition. Zero competition, the only sole source you have available in the market. Single source. Single source is very different. Multiple suppliers do exist, but you choose to buy from only one. This isn't based on necessity, it's based on preference. Maybe a long standing relationship you have from your past projects, or the company has a long standing relationship with that vendor. Uh, like I said, exceptional past performance or deeply integrated technology is where single source comes into picture. This is a strategic choice. Lastly, oligopoly. This is a market where limited competition is there. Think of industries like airlines or telecom. Here, the few dominant vendors are highly reactive to each other's pricing and offerings. Or even if you think of a local vendor, you go out on the streets and you see local vendors who are selling the vegetables or fruits, and they make a they are highly reactive to each other's pricing, and they see the other vendors pricing and they increase or decrease their pricing accordingly. So that is another example. Every move causes a ripple effect on the other vendors. This requires careful and tactical approach to bidding. Understanding these three environments is crucial for setting your negotiation strategy. Next, we'll look at the different types of contracts you can use in these markets. Remember that project managers don't usually create the contract themselves. We are lawyers. We work with the contracting officers and technical experts in the organization. The PM provides the technical requirement, and the legal team provides the structure, including the terms and conditions. We rely on the documents to define the work and solicit the bids. Not lawyers. We work with the contracting officers and technical experts in the primarily the request for proposal, or you call it as RFP. The key documents: what versus how. Here are two documents often confused, but they have distinct purpose: the SOR and the SOW, the statement of requirement and the statement of work. Statement of requirement. This is typically the earliest document we create. It focuses purely on the what. It's a high level summary of the buyer's needs and the functional, technical, and non functional outcomes the final solution must meet. Whereas statement of work, this is a detailed narrative description that defines the how, the when, and who of the work. It is our legally binding uh, blueprint of execution. It includes specific tasks, schedules, milestones, acceptance criteria, and payment terms. The SOW, the statement of work, is typically appended to the final master service agreement. I repeat, if you're noting it down, note it down. The SOW is typically appended to the final master service agreement. Now, the source selection. How do you select the source? Once the bids come, once the bids come back, how do we select the winner? Source selection is based on three criteria: price, experience, and delivery. Price is their offer financially viable. Is their offer financially viable? Experience is nothing but do you have the track record and capability to deliver it? And finally, the delivery. Can they meet our essential timelines? If the vendor is not available at the time of when we need them, there's no point having them. So, delivery. Can they meet our essential timelines? The moment the vendor is selected, we immediately update the project plan with the final agreed upon details, dates, costs, and quality requirements. I repeat, once the vendor is selected, we immediately update the project plan with the dates, costs, and quality requirements. Now, what is letter of intent? That's a new term for you. Letter of intent. Before the final legally binding contract is signed, the buyer often sends a letter of intent. This is a formal letter indicating that the seller will be awarded the contract. So that is a formal letter and it is not a contract. Again, crucially, it is not a legally binding contract itself. It just confirms our intent to do business, allowing the seller to begin pre-preparation work while the attorneys finalize the formal paperwork. This is nothing but a formal letter where the buyer sends it to the seller so that they confirm that we are going to go forward with their contract. And that wraps up the documentation and selection stage. Next up, we are going to get tactical and look at the three main types of contracts. Contract that is fixed price contract, cost reimbursable, and time and material contracts. And when to use each one of them. Before we dive into the three payment models, we need to cover the legal foundation. Before moving forward, I forgot to mention about what is request for information, what is a request for proposal, and request for quotation. So these three things, RFI, RFP, and RFQ, goes hand in hand and in the same sequence. First is done request for information. As you already know, and you might have already practiced, you send a vendor the request for information, and the vendor sends you the information of the services or the product they serve or they can provide us. Request for proposal is nothing but they provide the proposal. We send out. Request for proposal is once we have the information, we try to find information of different vendors. So we send the request for information, for example, to 3 or 4 vendors out there in the market, and then you go through the information, and then the 2 or 3 vendors you like or the service or products which you want are matching, you go ahead and send the request for proposal to those 2 or 3 vendors. And then they send us back the request for proposal, filled request for proposal. According to that, we will decide whom to send the request for quotation, the final price. And let's say we select 1 or 2 vendors from the list, and both of the vendors send us the quotation, final pricing, which they can offer us. And accordingly, we can select the vendor. So that is how the vendors are selected. Before we dive into the 3 payment modes, we need to cover the legal foundations of any valid contract. This is what makes a piece of paper legally enforced. A contract must meet several criteria. That is, to name a few, offer and acceptance. One party must make a clear offer, and the other party must provide an unambiguous acceptance that they are going to accept the offer. Next is consideration. This is the thing of value being exchanged, usually the payment or the cash for the service or the work. Okay, another one is legal purpose. The contract's objective must be lawful. You cannot contract to build something illegal, right? So legal purpose is important. And capacity and authority. The people signing the contract must be legally capable, not minors, and have the authority from their organization to sign it. That is very, very important. Now, within this legal framework, we choose the risk model. This is how we structure the payment, and it's the most important negotiation you will have to do. The three risk models, that is, the types of contracts, in other words. One is fixed price contract, cost reimbursable contract, or time and material contracts. Let's dive deep into all of these contracts. Fixed price contracts has again three models, that is firm fixed price FFP, fixed price incentive fees FPIF, fixed price with economic price adjustments. Those are the three models. This is all these contracts are very, very important, so note down and understand each one of them. So moving on to the first one, the fixed price contract, which has the three models again, FFP, FPIF, and FP-EPA. Now, what is fixed price contract itself? In a fixed price contract, the seller agrees to perform the defined work for a single predetermined price. All right, single predetermined price. What is the buyer's risk? The buyer's risk is low. The buyer knows the total cost upfront. Now, what is the buyer's risk? Buyer's risk is obviously low because the buyer knows the total cost upfront. Here, the important thing is sellers absorb the risk. That is, seller's risk is high. The seller underestimates the effort. They absorb the loss if occurred. The fixed price works best when the scope is well defined and stable. Not for all contracts, right? Now, the firm fixed price. Talking about firm's fixed price, this is the most common and the most rigid contract. The price is set and it does not change. Period. This offers the maximum predictability for the buyer. Again, here the seller has the high risk of absorbing the cost. So once the price is set, it's set, it does not change. And that's why the name suggests firm fixed price. Now, the fixed price incentive fees. What is fixed price incentive fees? This includes incentives, as the name suggests. The seller is paid extra if they meet or exceed the performance targets, like coming in under budget or finishing the work ahead of schedule. It has a pre-agreed price ceiling, which is the maximum limit the buyer will ever pay. Again, a new term for you all. Note it down if you're noting it down. Price ceiling. It is a pre-agreed maximum limit or price the buyer is ever going to pay if they have agreed upon the fixed price incentive fees contract. All right, and last but not the least, fixed price with economic price adjustment, FP-EPA. This is useful for long-term projects where inflation or commodity prices like steel or oil could dramatically change over several years. Also, another example is if there's a construction going on for any infrastructure, for example, a country or county or the city is building or the infrastructure of roads. That could be one of the examples of fixed price with economic price adjustments, because that's a huge project. It might take a few years to complete the project, and where the prices of commodity may increase. I would not say decrease, but eventually it's going to be increased. It's not going to be the same as the first year you are going to buy the material, the same as the 10th year you are buying the material for the same construction or infrastructure project. So the price of inflation is adjusted in this type of contract. It allows for predefined legitimate price adjustment because the contract accounts for the external changes. The risk is shared with the buyer, unlike the standard FFP we learned earlier, where the seller bears all of the cost. So that is fixed price contract. Moving on to the cost reimbursement contracts. Here again, we have three main contracts: cost plus fixed price, cost plus incentive fees, cost plus award fees. These might be a little confusing, but if you understand it clearly, you're not going to forget for until at least for a few years. So what is cost reimbursable contract? In a cost reimbursable contract, the buyer pays the seller for all actual costs incurred plus a fees. To give you a very simple example, if your company is sending an employee for a business trip, they are going to reimburse you the actual cost incurred, right, for your travel. That is what reimbursable means. Now, the cost reimbursable contract means you will get the reimbursement for the actual cost incurred plus a fees. All right. Here, the buyer's risk is high. Unlike the fixed price contract, there the buyer's risk is low. Here, in the cost reimbursable, buyer's risk is high. The final cost is uncertain. If you are buying something with this type of contract, you are likely going to get a price, or you have to pay the amount higher because the price or the cost is not fixed upfront. Again, the seller risk is lower. The seller is guaranteed to cover their costs. This is used when the scope is highly uncertain, like research and development projects. Right? Now, let's look at the three types of contracts in cost reimbursable contracts: cost plus fixed fees. That is, fees is fixed guarantee regardless of the performance. So, you get a fixed amount of the reimbursement from the buyer. The fees is fixed regardless of the performance. Okay, you are going to get the actual incurred cost plus a fees which is fixed. Okay. Next is cost plus incentive fees. Here, the seller gets extra for meeting or exceeding the cost, schedule goals, or any of the goals they meet or exceed. The seller shares the savings. So, for example, if the seller completes the work before time or they save $20,000 for the buyer have to pay maybe $4,000, $5,000 to the seller, to the vendor, for meeting or exceeding the expectations of the cost or the schedule, right? Whatever amount has been fixed earlier during the contract, during when the contract has been made. So the percentage, whatever has been discussed or agreed upon, they have to pay them the fixed that amount from the savings. And cost plus award fees is nothing but buyer awards a fee based on a satisfaction or the performance of the vendor. For example, on the quality, if the vendor loves, the buyer loves the quality uh, the vendor has produced during the project, the buyer can be happy and give the buyer award fee based on the satisfaction or performance. This is kind of vague. Unlike the cost plus incentive fees, here the contract mentions maybe the percentage of the cost savings they are going to earn, like 50-50 or 40-50 or 20-50, 20-80. So that is already known. This is subjective. The award fees is subjective. It's subjective to the buyer. If I think the vendor has given a lovely quality, or they have made some impact, or brought some innovative ideas, I will award the vendor for the satisfaction or performance. So that is subjective, whereas the incentive fees is not subjective. It is already mentioned in the contract. I hope the difference is very, very clear. for all the contracts we have learned so far. Lastly, let's look at what is time and material. The time and material contract is a hybrid. It pays a vendor a preset hourly rate and reimburses them for materials. It has elements of both fixed hourly rates, like the fixed price, and the scope uncertainty of the cost reimbursable contract. It's ideal for staff augmentation, short term support, or when the extra scope or duration is unknown, but the total effort is expected to be limited. So I hope today's session was exciting and you learned something really valuable and something new from today's session. Keep moving forward. You guys are doing great, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.